Hello and welcome to 52 Weeks. This week we're going to be continuing through Chapter 4 in the Parks, Civic, and Open Spaces. And specifically we're going to be looking at the next 6 weeks on the types of parks and public space that are discussed in Chapter 4. So the last two parks we'll be looking at this week, one is the proposed Southern Green. This is in the area that's south of 83. Currently in Harrisburg, there are 3 main parks that are around the city, and there's really none on the south. And one thing to consider here is we've got PennDOT building, and we also have the Greenbelt coming through here. There's kind of a start of a park that's down here. The things that need to be connected across is the railroad tracks, as well as connecting back into other green spaces. This park becomes what's known as an occupied park that has a mix of both public and private uses. So we know that buildings are going to be on this. So one thing to be considering with this area is that we understand the environmental hazards. This area is full of karst limestone underground. That's represented in this map showing all of south of 83 is impacted by that. And we can see some of the sinkholes from 2014 on 14th Street. These still exist underneath the housing around there. So we should really do a good service to the residents that live here and actually plan out what's next and look at the long term. And also this area is disconnected by 83 and not really joined in here as far as the city grid is concerned. So those are some design things to be considering. The proposed Southern Green looks at part of the site that was former Phoenix Steel property. So part of it is also Harrisburg Housing Authority, which owns the houses and actually looks at trying to help the public housing need within Harrisburg. And they're currently working through updating and removing any obsolete housing stock. So this is something to be thinking about with the housing that's on the site in Hall Manor, and provides a greening process for formal industrial and institutional lands into a public land reserve. So this becomes a park that is large enough that works on ways to connect back to the city and also connect the city to the river, considering the connections, the rail trail connections back to the Paxton Creek, Reservoir Park, and then also the Greenbelt. The second proposed green space is the Central Green, and this is happening as another second occupied park because there's other uses that are mixed in between her and State Street along Cameron, and this is also overlapping the Paxton Creek and that watershed. The proposed Central Green looks at transforming existing structures that are on site into related recreation or support activities and uses, knowing that this is also a hazardous area and also prone to flooding from the Paxton Creek. So one final lesson that's summarized in this discussion of large park is also learning from public mistakes. So in the comp plan, there's a cautionary tale about the Capitol View Commerce Center and that whole history. We really should learn from public mistakes and provide more accountability, oversight, and transparency in the planning process, or a way to look at new development coming into the city and go through a system. This is going to be a constant problem in Harrisburg, and this is why it's a cautionary tale. Any new development that's going to happen in the next 10 years without a solid planning process that's not dysfunctional and actually is working well with all kinds of entities, we're going to see projects that continue to not live up to this idea of supporting residents or existing neighborhoods. There's going to be a lot of private interest that drives it, which is Harrisburg's traditional thinking. And that should be challenged. I think that's what we should be doing as citizens, as concerned citizens, challenging our government to push against this and not have this run by developers. So this becomes an unending story of private will over the public good. That's one thing I think is in Harrisburg's history that really needs to be shifted. And at this particular location, the personal private goals of individuals was to see the Cameron and her intersection as the next area for future growth. And that's really what it's been touted as, even as it exists now and occupied. So the final question is to look at this is an uncertain future. Can Harrisburg and the region learn to adapt to a future for all? Can we get beyond this personal looking towards developers or seeing them as a savior for the city? The investment of $28 million in a speculative project with an inexperienced, unqualified owner-developer is a response to a compulsive attempt to put back industrial uses in the creek's riparian corridor. So the question is, what is our long-term legacy? This goes back to discussing with the Harrisburg City Beautiful movement. What is going to be our legacy? Are we going to look back, and look at what we've done, knowing that there are issues of putting buildings into floodplains and doing a disservice to the landscape that's here and not mitigating some of the waterways that need to be developed? So this is a really huge charge for us to consider. What is going to be our future? So thanks again for this week's 52 Weeks. Next week, we'll be looking into linear parks and the green grid, and I hope you enjoy the rest of that discussion in Chapter 4. Thank you.